And okay, so now we see a table, but if you
Yeah, let me figure out how to flip myself around. That work?
Yeah, very well. We have a very special guest today. It's a brand new company in the index culture or on the index culture list of challenge companies, Kimray. And it's a very different company from the ones that most of you have seen in the past, those who have participated before and those who have participated this semester. Most of the time, we select companies that make products that everyone sort of is familiar with. It would be clothing companies, shoes, food, things like that. This time, we have a company that makes equipment that ultimately all of us benefit from. But at the same time, it's a lesser known product, at least to the normal, regular people. Like, for example, I don't have much experience with this industry, even though I did spend 2 years in Texas and then another 7 years in Alberta, both of which are global players in the oil and gas industries. So anyway, the client or the company that we are presenting today is Kimray, and they make equipment for oil and gas extraction. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and so
sir.
we have a few students, in fact, this semester who are at universities that specialize in oil and gas management. For example, the University of Calgary, so the MBA program there specifically deals mainly with management of oil and gas facilities and industries. So for some students, it will be a very, very familiar industry. For others, maybe not so much. And so today we will try to learn more about one of the major players in this industry, Kimray. So maybe we will start with a simple question. Can you tell us a little bit about the company, maybe the history, the products, and then for students, if you have any questions, you can always ask them in the Q&A window. I have a lot of questions by email from students who have classes now and could not attend live, and we will try to go through all of those questions.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me today. So my name is Jacob Jennings. I work for a company called Kimray, and we're located in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. So if, for those of you not familiar where that is, if you know where Dallas, Texas is, and you head straight north 3 hours, you'll come to Oklahoma. So we're a family-owned company. We're in our third generation. So our company was started in 1948 by a gentleman named Garmin Kimmel, who was.
So you're a private company, right? You're not listed publicly?
Yes, we are a privately held company. So with the third generation, so Garmin Kimmel started the company, and now his grandson runs the company. And Garmin's son-in-law is on the board of directors, the chairman of the board of directors. So privately held, roughly running up close to about 900 employees. And the bulk of those will be in Oklahoma City, roughly 700 of those in Oklahoma City, and the rest scattered throughout the U.S. in our different distributorships. Kimray is a little bit different from a typical manufacturer, and that we also have a sales and distribution model from our organization. A typical manufacturer will make a product and then run 100% through distribution. About 50% of our sales run through distribution. So I work in an international department, and so in the international department, 100% of our sales run through distribution.
So can you explain that? What would be the other alternative? So what do other companies do? They would sell directly to the customers, or is that what you're
correctly? Very typically in our market. So we provide control valves, regulators, dump valves, pumps, all the equipment that you're going to find in upstream and some midstream applications. And so an upstream location will be the wellhead. So at the wellhead, where they're extracting the oil and gas in the water, you'll have separators and equipment. So if you ever drive by a well location and you see separators, you see red equipment, that is Kimray. We're the largest supplier of control equipment in the U.S. The midstream sector is really, that's where you go to clean the product up before you put it in a pipeline to send it to a refinery. So for us, in the U.S., we will sell direct to customers. So that will be a lot of resellers and equipment manufacturers, and then some end users, ExxonMobil, Shell, Devon, XTO, maybe some names that you're familiar with. So they buy a lot of our Chevron, they buy a lot of our product. Internationally, we do not have Kimray distributorships. So previous to my position, I worked in Houston, Texas, and worked with a lot of the majors there. And I also worked across the street and worked with a lot of our big producers like Devon and Chesapeake and Oklahoma City. we would sell directly to them from a separate store. Now, in international, we do not do that. We run 100% through distribution. So we have authorized distributors who buy our product and then resell it to their customers.
Now we have quite a few questions, and I'll just give them in the random order that they come. So names, it's a private company. Where does the name come from?
The name comes from the two people who started the company, Garmin Kimmel. Is the Kim, and there's another gentleman with the last name Raymond.
Okay, that makes sense.
They basically took the two names and put them together. Raymond did not stay long with the company. Mr. Garmin quickly bought him out in the first couple of years, but the name stuck.
That makes sense. The size of the company. So how many employees does the company have, if that's not a secret information?
Say that again.
The size of the company. How many employees do you have? And then also another student is asking how many of them are in production, how many of them are in sales. Again, unless this is
okay. Yeah. So we're roughly about 900 people, and in that 900, roughly 200, somewhere in the ballpark of 200, are represented within the sales and marketing portion of the company.
And all of them are in the United States, right?
All of them are in the United States.
In Oklahoma or all around the country?
Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, Pennsylvania. Those would be where all of our Kimray.
In terms of the products, so we understand you make the actual hardware.
Mm-hmm.
Who does
Yes.
the installation, or is it something that the customers can install themselves?
The customers install. So they'll hire either their own employees will install that, or we sell that to what we would call an OEM, so an original equipment manufacturer or a fabricator, where they're the ones who are building the separators and tanks, and then on their equipment, they will go ahead and pre-install the Kimray equipment.
Is this primarily for the oil extraction or also for gas?
For both. So we manage both 2-phase and 3-phase. So in a 2-phase operation, gas, that would be a 2-phase would be a gas well. The byproducts of those wells would be gas or water. You will find our equipment. And then you also have 3-phase, and a 3-phase is oil, gas, and water. So I work primarily in a lot of 2-phase applications overseas. Turkey is a 3-phase application. They do have oil, but in India and also in Australia, you have a lot of coal bed methane. And coal bed methane is a byproduct from coal wells. So they're extracting coal from the ground for heating purposes to create electricity. A byproduct of that is naturally methane. So the methane would just be water and methane. So just a simple 2-phase.
Louise Coran is one of our professors from France here. She has a few questions, and I thought it would be easier just to add her to the mix. So go ahead, please, with your questions while I'll read the email questions here, which keep coming.
I was really just about the size of the international market compared to the national market, and where you sell at the moment. You say it's mainly distributors, but where and what percentage does it make up of your sales?
So we're roughly about a $200 million company. About 10 million of that is coming from international. And Kimray has been in the international market for roughly about the last 10 years. Majority of our sales come from Mexico, Canada, and China right now. So I would say 80% of that is Mexico, China, and Canada.
To fully close the product topic section, so a couple of students also ask, what is your relationships with your customers? Once you sell the product, is that it, or you also offer some warranty, service, customer support?
Yeah, so there is a warranty. There's a 1-year warranty or 18 months from shipment on all our products. I would say what makes Kimray different from a lot of our competitors is the service after the sale. With some of our competitors who also make fantastic products, their relationship usually ends right after that sale. And so that's why Kimray has invested in gentlemen like myself, business development managers. So I was just in Turkey, and while I was in Turkey, I was meeting with customers. I'll be in Australia next month, meeting with customers and going to the field, looking over process conditions, issues in the field, meeting with engineers to really kind of do the full turnkey. So we really complete the full sales cycle. It's not just recommending the product and then moving on. We kind of hold their hand through the entire process.
So you mentioned competition, and we have quite a few questions about competition. So who are your competitors? Maybe some specific companies, or what kind of companies, domestic, international? And then you already mentioned some of the advantages you have over the competition, like better customer support. Anything else that is your strength or weakness compared to competition?
So I think a strength for us is we're one of the few companies that manufacture 100% U.S. made. So U.S. castings, U.S. materials. I will say in the international market that at times is not as a big benefit. It really just depends on the customers. Some customers do not allow items from the Far East or India. And so if they do not, then that's a big feather in our cap. So since we manufacture and assemble everything here in Oklahoma. From a competitor standpoint, Norsil Wellmark. So Norsil Wellmark is a competitor. Fisher is a competitor. Mason Elin, they're a GE company, is a competitor. CVS, their Canadian company, is a competitor. Metso is another competitor.
So there are quite a few companies that.
I would say Kimray is probably about 30 years late to the international market. So we're kind of trying to play catch up.
Can I ask you, we had a very interesting webinar a few days ago about international marketing. And so it's not about your company per se, but I'm just curious how it works in your industry. So one of the topics that came up was the country of origin. And so apparently people in most countries prefer to buy domestic. So they sort of believe that they are patriotic when they buy American in America, German in Germany. Likewise, different countries have sort of different image, like Swiss products are considered high quality, German products are considered high quality. So in oil and gas industry, the fact that you're all 100% American made, does that help? Is it appealing to your customers? And then when you sell internationally, does that project image of quality, America being basically the #1 oil producer today? Or do people prefer, I don't know, Japanese or German or whoever else makes products?
A lot of it is a company by company basis. So it's kind of company specific. Overall, the U.S. is known for producing high quality materials. Not to say that those items that can't come from anywhere else. So yeah, that is always a benefit when you say made in the USA. There's kind of just automatically, you just kind of get looped in automatically with quality, whether that's true or not. Fortunately for us, it is true. When you look at it internationally and abroad, at times it does hurt us. So you can get high quality materials out of India, and you can get high quality materials out of China. Fortunately for those companies who have those supply chain resources, the cost of labor, cost of materials is much cheaper. And so when you have companies who are operating at very low margins, typically those are going to be in gas plays. Gas right now is trending somewhere about 250 an MCF, million cubic feet. It's not very much. They have to look to alternative resources and I just may be more expensive. And so they have no other choice but to look for items out of those countries. So in those opportunities, it really doesn't matter what I do or how I market. I will never be competitive. My only solution is to then look at outside resources, casting from China, castings from India. And those are all conversations we're weighing right now. So as the global market is shifting within oil and gas, typically the U.S. has been manufacturing and producing gas much longer than about anywhere else. So Turkey has a relatively young market. The U.S. has been doing it. So a lot of people were taking what the U.S. was doing and now looking at unconventional wells. So that would be lateral wells, fracking, and trying to understand that more. That global marketplace, now everyone is seeing that there is money to be made. And so now you're seeing a lot of valve manufacturers in Turkey, in Australia, in Italy, in China, everyone now, basically, if they have oil and gas, they could buy a domestic product. It's just trying to figure out how high of a quality that domestic product is. Because those companies could be relatively young. Kimray's been doing this for 71 years. Some of those companies who have just popped up may only be 3 or 4 or 5 years old.
We still keep getting questions about products. And so one student is asking, can you describe what those valves look like? I mean, how big are these things? Are we talking about like a whole oil pump, or is it more like a little unit that is added somehow to the?
Yeah, so our product line ranges anywhere from 1 inch to 10 inches in size.
So those are relatively small, high
Relatively, yeah. So we have some partnerships with ball valve companies and whatnot, where we can then sell things in excess of 24, 36, 48, 52. That's really where you get into the big. The majority of our stuff is not going to exceed 10 inches because
so how high tech is it then? So is it like what makes it valuable?
Anytime that you're producing oil and gas, you have to control the flow rate and you have to control pressure. And that's what our product does. By no means is it overly complicated.
So just high quality materials.
It's a high quality material, and we're very precise with what we do. And so Garmin Kimmel was the first guy who actually manufactured the first back pressure control valve. And the purpose of that product was it regulated the pressure in the separator. So within that separator, you have oil and you have water and you have gas. Well, if you think about it, if you take some salad dressing that's maybe oil based and you shake it up, there are a lot of different specific gravities in that salad dressing. If you set it on the table over time, they'll start to separate out. Well, it's no different than in that vessel. It takes some time and it takes pressure that we need to allow the water to separate from the oil, and then the gas will naturally break out and rise to the top. The kicker is you need to make sure to maintain pressure in that vessel, so that way the pressure in the vessel is higher than the line pressure. Because if that line pressure is too high, you'll never dump your liquid. And so that's what before Mr. Kimmel created his back pressure valve, they were trying to do it with different mechanisms, and none of them were very precise. Well, he created a very low-cost solution that did it very well, and it took off from there. So we kind of standardized our product line on about every well location in the U.S.
Got it. Now I'm bombarded with questions from all sides in Q&A window through email. So I've added a few students here who had interesting questions. Shamel, Kadleen, if you guys want to unmute your microphones, introduce yourselves and go ahead with your questions. That will give me time to go through the emails if you have the sound.
You can't unmute your phone.
So Kadleen, Shamel, do you guys want to go ahead with your questions?
Okay, hello, I'm Shamel.
Yeah, tell us where you are, what country you are from, and then go ahead with your question, please.
Can't unmute your phone.
Hello, I'm Shamel.
Yeah, go ahead. We can hear you. Yes.
Shamel, I'm from Jamaica, and my question is, what weakness does your company face, separate and apart from competitors?
Weakness. A weakness of our company is going to be the market we play in.
Okay.
So just by definition, oil and gas, it's a tidal wave. Some years it's good, some years it's bad. So if we would call them producers, if our customers are not drilling wells, we are not selling very much product. And so our company is rapidly looking towards diversification. So we have a 2035 vision plan, and in that 2035 vision plan, looking for 50% of our revenue to be coming from non-oil and gas. So as it sits right now, we're not close to that. We're still in the process stage and planning stage of what that looks like, and how do we invest our resources and capital into other either factories or products or things that are not related to oil and gas. But as it sits right now, when you play in this market, it's very volatile.
All right. Now we also have a lot of questions about geography, and so Kathleen and Julian, you guys had questions of that nature. If you want to go ahead with your questions, Julian.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So I'm Julian. I come from France, and indeed, it's a difficult company that you are presenting us, but it's kind of challenging, let's say. And my question was about the fact that in your file that you submitted on this X-Culture platform, you said that you were seeking the Turkish market. Is it because of the percentage of oil that they possess on their land, or why? I did not clearly get this point.
Yeah, so what we're kind of looking at is I spent last week in Turkey, and within Turkey, geothermal power plants present a large opportunity for our company. And so a geothermal well and an oil and gas well aren't that different. They're still you're replacing oil and gas with hot water. And so what geothermal is doing is they're using that hot water and the steam that hot water produces to spin turbines to generate electricity. And Turkey, for us, is kind of a new market for us. They've been using our standard products for a long time. We have never had a specific distributor in that area. So I'm looking at signing a new distributor, probably here in the next couple of weeks, a company out of Houston to represent us. But they have a deep foothold in the geothermal market. So a lot of their customer base is in geothermal. So part of the previous question was kind of what's a fear, what's a negative about our company, or that fear and negative is really that we're so tied to oil and gas that we need to look how to expand into different markets. And geothermal is one of the markets I believe that with some tweaks or changes possibly to our product line, maybe that's different materials or different sizes, different actuators. I'm unsure at this point. I believe that we could expand and diversify our current product line into that new market, and that new market would then expand possibly. There's geothermal in the U.S., not as much, but there is other geothermal markets outside of Turkey. Turkey is just one of the larger ones.
So that actually brings us to a very interesting series of questions we have here. Many students ask about alternative energy, green energy. And so as we understand, your company works basically with pressure and flow, right?
Yes.
So when you're talking about like solar panels, there is really not much you can help there. But once you get to geothermal, that's where you have pressure and flow just of water instead of oil. And that's where you can make those valves and control. Are there any other forms of alternative energy where your equipment may be used? Wind, probably not so much, right?
Not so much. So geothermal and then right now, natural gas are the two major ones. We don't really play in the wind turbines or the hydro dams, or I would say methane recovery farms is something that's a little new, and so that's basically. How do we take maybe waste products and capture methane from those? That market is still, I would call it an unknown, because it's so small that our products have been used in the U.S. So companies like Waste Management, who collect a lot of trash, debris, over time, you kind of put all that stuff together. You stack it on top of each other. You add some sunlight. You get some biogas from it. It's a pretty nasty gas. And by nasty, what I mean by that is it's very saturated. It's very wet gas. So our products have been used somewhat in those type of applications, but in the U.S. it's not as big as it is in certain other markets. I know that they're looking at that, but that would be a potential other market for us. It's gas. It needs to be regulated. It needs to be cleaned up, and so that we could be in that market as well.
So can we talk some more about geography then? So you mentioned Turkey, and primarily because they are a potential market in a new industry, geothermal. So, but talking about geography in general, we have students from Kenya, we have students from Nigeria, from all of Middle East, pretty much every possible country there, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Qatar. And Canada, obviously, we have quite a few universities. So in terms of your interest in expanding your geographic footprint with your main oil and gas products, are there specific countries you're interested in, or if there is interest, you would sell anywhere? And then a related question maybe here, certification. Are these products that need to be certified somehow, or as long as there is a customer willing to buy, that's all that matters?
Yeah, so as far as certification, they're using our existing ISO 9001 certifications that we have. Turkey is not as certain companies are a little more strict. Europe has PED and CE certifications. You branch into Australia and others that have an ATEX or IEC certifications. So Turkey for us, thankfully, will take the U.S. Certifications that we are using, and we are quickly. We've hired a new guy onto our team, or actually we've promoted a gentleman off of our team whose sole goal this for next year is looking at certifications and how those play. So how does PED and CE certification, IEC, ATEX, all of these certifications that we need as we're going to expand globally. So it is definitely something that we need to attack to really expand to a global market. I specifically cannot speak to Africa just because a lot of Africa in certain areas, a lot of that is in kind of an offshore drilling. And while a lot of our products are being used offshore in the U.S., we haven't really. Africa at times can be in the oil and gas market is a little unclear. And so because there are so many partnerships, you always don't know who's pulling what strings in regards to who's building the equipment, who's determining what they're using. And so it can be a little muddy to try to figure out. So we would have to, I think as far in regards to Africa, as we and some of these other countries, as we continue to grow our team and can commit more resources, we at some point can start looking at that as from a future. But right now it's kind of all hands on deck with the areas that we are working in to try to just take care of the customers in those areas.
Several questions about threats. So Yukta is asking about market threats in general, and then anonymous attendee, somebody didn't put in the name. For example, the conflict between Turkey and Syria, in fact, a developing story. Would those things affect your business at all?
They only affect our business when tariffs and restrictions are applied. So, in regard, right now, it is affecting my business for China because we have a 10% tariff on China. So for my distributor, anytime that we ship to China, they automatically take a 10% hit. So that it does affect their bottom line. Right now into Turkey, it does not affect. I do not know what that will look like, say, here in the next 3 or 6 months. It's very at times complicated when you are trying to do business internationally. The geopolitical side. Argentina this year has been quite complicated because of all of the issues going on with Argentina. So at times it is quite complicated to do business internationally. But as of right now with Turkey, we don't perceive any future threats. But again, with the recent news as of yesterday and today, I don't know.
Another interesting question, and I added a few more students who have good questions too, but one interesting is metric versus imperial. So you're an American company, American-based, you probably use imperial standards. So when you sell overseas, does that create any problems with the measurement standards?
No, I mean, I think what we, in our data sheets, when we're giving some data sheets, we're just converting from imperial to metric. But as a whole, a lot of the production equipment is sourced out of the U.S. just because we have so many qualified manufacturers that it hasn't been an issue. And a lot of times, a lot of the valves and things that they're sourcing are U.S. Maybe my competitors, other U.S. So up to this point, no. They kind of oil and gas kind of runs off of imperial.
Okay, makes sense. Dimitri, Shibon, you had good questions. So if you want to go ahead with your questions, just unmute your microphones and ask them, and I'll try to catch up on the questions that I'm receiving through email.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, my question was about recently Turkey has begun exploring for oil around Cyprus and in international waters, and this has become some sort of an international dispute. But I was wondering, do you see any political risk? It doesn't look like anything is going to stop them, and if there is, I mean, the people you're talking to in Turkey, are they, do you see any potential in this as well?
Yeah, up to this point, a lot of it's just unclear and unknown. So, so I had a meeting with TPAO and some of the other big, I guess really TPAO is the largest producer in Turkey as it stands. A lot of the things when you're dealing with international, it's a completely different market than the U.S. Everything in the U.S. is last minute. They need everything yesterday. So they are always producing wells. When you move into an international market, it moves a little different. What happens is you move to a more project-based, and things take a lot longer. And so, Dimitri, it's a great question. I think what's going to happen is we're probably still looking 2 to 3 years away from even production being started in those oil plays. So they found something, they're going to dispute it, they're going to have to go back and do the resources, they're going to have to raise the capital to be able to start drilling offshore, because the infrastructure needed to drill an offshore well is usually about 10 times what it is when you're talking about drilling a domestic well. So there's a lot of resources that have to be committed on that side. And so I think what we'll see is over the next few years, really how this starts to flush out. Because you're right, Turkey has started exploring more in the offshore realm and trying to try to look around Cyprus, and there's some other areas that they believe that there's some good pockets of oil, but it's just to be foreseen how TPAO and some of the others will press forward over the next couple of years.
Okay, thanks.
Shivam, Sarah, you had good questions. If you want to go ahead and ask them. Shivam, go ahead.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
I'm from India, and as per my knowledge, I came to know that it is estimated that natural fuels such as coal and gas fuels will be exhausted till 2050. So, what are your plans regarding that? As in India, it is already started to shift towards solar energy, hydro energy. I just wanted to ask that.
So that's a big strategic question. When the natural resources run out, are you preparing for that?
Yeah, so I think that's part of our kind of 2030 vision plan. And especially that's what we look at into looking at new markets like geothermal. A typical geothermal well is going to last roughly 25 years. And so they build these power plants to last 25 years. And so then they decommission them and then they drill another one. So you're continually using the same hot water out of the earth. They're just recycling it. But there will become a point where then that water, you kind of use up all your resources. So for us, there's kind of strategic. One is to look at these opportunities for geothermal. And then from a bigger company strategic, that is why Kimray has this big, hairy, audacious goal of being $1 billion company, with $500 million of that coming from non-oil and gas. And so the company and the board and the directors are all looking at how we are a very cash flow positive company. How do we utilize these resources, and how do we deploy them into diversification? You'll see from Kimray probably over the next couple of years, there's some mergers and some acquisitions that we start to pick up and merge and acquire different companies. And some of those companies are going to continue to be, let's say, maybe one step away from what we're doing now. And that one step may be similar customers. Maybe it's just a different product. And the goal is to where you're getting 2 to 3 steps away from your core. 2 steps may be same industry, new customers, new products. And then 3 steps away is new industry, new customers, new products. So we're going to be very strategic in how we start to separate ourselves away from oil and gas. Oil and gas will always be the legacy. We'll always continue to make these products. And the goal is to continue to grow and to grow international. We believe the opportunity is very strong. So we are, to put it kind of simply, everyone kind of plays in our sandbox. our competitors don't really compete with us on a domestic market, but now we're trying to play in everyone else's sandbox in the international market. And so we have to make some radical changes in our company structure and our certifications and our testing and things that are required from us in the international market. And it's wise of us to do that because what you're seeing is a lot of foreign investment internationally. So companies in China, companies in Japan, companies in Turkey, companies in Russia are now starting to make acquisitions into the US market because they have limited resources themselves in their own market. So they're going to start deploying capital into our market and make acquisitions. And so when they do that, they're going to take their standards and their certifications that they've been doing internationally and start applying those to a US market. And so we need to be geared up and prepared for that when it hits over the next 5 to 10 years.
Sarah Saeed, you had some questions. Go ahead, please, if you can hear us.
Okay, my question was, would it be cheaper for your company to produce your products overseas instead of producing it in the US?
Outsourcing. Have you considered that?
Absolutely. I mean, it would actually be cheaper. I would say that doesn't align with the strategic value of our company. So the strategic value of our company is to make a difference in the lives of those we serve. We don't make valves. We make a valve just to make a valve. We make a valve so that we can serve others. And so part of that is serving our own community here in Oklahoma City. So it would absolutely be cheaper to farm our engineering and our manufacturing and our assembly out overseas because the labor rates are quite different than they are here in the US. But the company is set up a little bit differently, and it's really not all about the bottom dollar. So we provide a lot of jobs. We give a lot to our community, both through time and resources and manpower. And we've been doing that since our inception. And so thankfully the company wants to continue doing that. Now we are being smart and realizing that the global economy is changing. The global oil and gas market is different now. And so we are starting to look at, do we also need to be able to provide maybe some materials and some castings from India and Taiwan and China, so that if a customer is open to those opportunities, we have strategic partners, one of our distributors in China, that we can source those materials through. They could help us with the vendor side and working in those countries. That would bolster our distributor sales. That would help them out. And maybe there's some kind of joint venture that we could work through with them, and it benefits both of our companies. So we are trying to be strategic over the next year or two and really looking at how do we play in both markets? How do we offer a domestic product for those customers who will only use that? And for those customers who are open to items from China and India and Taiwan, how do we also offer that product so that way we can be strategic and meet everyone's needs where they are?
That's very admirable that you have that strategy. So I know many companies are trying to outsource. Well, we have a bunch of questions about marketing. So I would like to shift gears here and talk more about the promotion strategy that you currently are using. So first, it's not the type of product that you would advertise on TV, right? So how do you talk to your customers? Is it some conferences, conventions, specialized magazines, or what are the channels that you can reach your customers through?
So a lot of the channels that we're reaching through our customers is through our current distribution model. So the way we go to market internationally with a customer. A few of our vendors, one being Distribution Now. You can think of them as basically the Walmart of the oil and gas. They have deep ties in with really every producing country. So they're set up in the UK, and they're set up in Dubai, and they're set up in Australia and Brisbane, in Singapore, and Jakarta, in Argentina, and Brazil, and really all over. So that really helps. So one, you're working where your customers are. The second is shows, conferences we're always a part of. In fact, OTC, which is the biggest, one of the big conferences in Houston every year, the Offshore conference. We're there. will be set up. It's a local domestic one, but the biggest show in Oklahoma City for this market is next week. We're there, so we'll have a big booth and we're meeting our customers. And the other one is through our sales channels. So we have gentlemen like me who are in business development, who are traveling internationally, meeting with customers, with our distributors, getting in their offices. We have a really good idea about who's using our products and who's not. And so we visit and we train and we talk. And really, it's just through relationships that we have built our business. We do advertising and publications and whatnot, but really, it's kind of crazy to say the oil and gas market is actually quite small.
And we actually have a question about that. So how tight is this community? Is it the type of deal where everybody knows everybody, or you still have to advertise a lot?
It really is. In your certain market, everyone knows everyone. So you never burn a bridge, because if you burn a bridge, everyone hears about it. So within the U.S. market, it's very small. Everyone is connected. It's kind of the what's that term in the U.S. It's the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? That
right.
Kevin Bacon to any actor.
Yeah, 7 degrees of separation.
7 degrees separation. It's the same in the oil and gas, that everyone is so interconnected. I was in Turkey, and there were people here that knew people back in the U.S. that I knew. It was kind of crazy that I could travel to Turkey and that we could make connections, people I've never met. So that being said, it's relationship based. If you're successful in what you're doing, it's because you have good relationships.
Right, that makes sense. Also, there is a question about China and the government, and China expanding rapidly into Africa, the Middle East, buying resources and trying to get into mining and oil and gas extraction business. And apparently the Chinese companies are greatly helped by their own government. Do you have any relationships with the American government? Are there any programs that help you? Or in the US, in this industry, there is basically the government is the government and the industry is the industry?
Yeah, so we meet, there are several conferences that meet in the U.S. maybe once or twice a year, where you're meeting with your different consulates. And I was at one this last year where Germany, Switzerland, France, Indonesia, all their consulates were represented. And so they're traveling from D.C. here to Oklahoma, and it's kind of an international day. And so for those companies who are looking to do business internationally, that's kind of where you get started. Now, thankfully, we have had those relationships for a while, and so we don't rely on those as much. What we really rely on is the relationships for distributors in country. And so when I travel to Brisbane and when I travel to Singapore and Jakarta and Turkey, we're relying on our distributors in those areas because they know how to do business better than anyone. And an example of that would be in Jakarta. Oftentimes, because DNOW is a U.S.-based company, but they have all hired and that have been in that country for probably 20 years, and everyone is from Jakarta. But if they need to be able to bid a tender, sometimes they have to route that through a local company. And so that's just kind of the way that sometimes you have to do business. So they just need the name of the company to be able to release the tender for Tamina. Different places operate differently. So having those resources in country who understand the political side, the cultural side, is a big benefit for a U.S. company who doesn't know all the intricacies of the local economy.
How strongly is your industry affected by regulations, trade barriers, trade wars, import tariffs? You did mention import tariffs a little bit. So are those things that affect your ability to expand internationally much or not so much?
I would say for us, probably not so much at the size we are. If we were a $500 million international company, I believe those things would hurt us quite a bit. So if we were doing $300 million to China and there was a 10% hit on that's a large hit. So as it stands, that we're not quite at the size yet, because if you can think of us, although we're a very senior oil and gas valve manufacturer domestically, we're in a kind of startup mode on the international side. So we have a a small team of about 8 to 10 of us that are working day in, day out. We have only 2 to 3 business development. My senior the guy I report to he's in India right now, working with the customers there, and he travels to China and works with our distributor there. So for us at the size we are, thankfully, we haven't been hit too much by that. Now, at some point, those things will come back to play as we continue to grow, and it's going to affect how we do business, and in that we'll have to probably look at shifting to using some manufacturing overseas and some strategic partnerships that will allow us to cut some cost to be able to play in that global market.
The questions keep coming, and I have a feeling that we have answered most of them, but there is a whole block of questions about not related to the company itself, but more about career advice. So some students are asking what kind of qualifications you're looking for or qualities you're looking for in people who apply for jobs at your company. Another student is asking what would it take to get a job at your company. And another one is asking if you could go back in time and basically do college all over again, what would you do differently to improve your chances of success in this industry?
So if I could go back a long time, college, that's a good question. I came out of my college career not knowing what I wanted to do.
And yeah, talking about that, so what was your education, and did you train to be an oil and gas?
No, not at all.
What background did you come from?
I have an interpersonal communications degree.
Okay.
So,
So how did you end up in oil and gas then?
Godsend. My background, I was in construction. I managed a commercial roofing company, family-owned commercial roofing company. I was working about 90 to 100 hours a week, and I was never seeing my wife, my young bride, and said, enough is enough. I'm done with this. And so my wife and I prayed about it, and we said, what are we going to do? Consulted friends. We're going to pray every day for 30 days. And really what every opportunity comes down to is networking.
Yeah.
You have to be able to network with people. You have to be able to use the resources that God has provided you to network and make connections. And I had a friend who worked at Kimray. I had never heard of Kimray. I knew nothing about oil and gas. I didn't know how oil and gas got out of the ground. I didn't know what a well was. I didn't know what fracking. I couldn't tell you anything. I knew what a pump jack was. That's it, because I saw them growing up. I contacted him and he said, hey, actually, we have an opportunity here. Why don't you apply for it? For some unknown reason, they shot and hired me, and now it's taken me all over the world.
So does that mean that being good with people may be more important than having the technical expertise and communication skills?
Yeah. So what I tell our team here is we look for people who are hungry, who are humble, and who are smart. And that smart does not mean a technical intelligence. You have to be able to read people, read situations, communicate clearly, communicate to an audience, build relationships and friendships with people. So if you're hungry and you will work hard and you will commit yourself, and that doesn't mean I need 150%. We don't need people who will give 1,000% to the company and nothing to the family, because at that point you burn out. You have to be able to balance a work and a family life. So you have to be humble, and you have to know what you don't know and be able to ask questions and learn. And then you have to be able to be smart and understand that whole thing. So if you're humble, hungry, and smart, I believe those 3 qualities will take you anywhere.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's a good news or bad news. On the one hand, I suppose it's good news, but on the other hand, it's easy to read a book and memorize numbers. It's not so easy to change your personality and the way you treat people.
Well, no, I would say if I could do it all over again, I would have an engineering degree.
Right. That makes sense.
I mean, what I've had to learn about the engineering side of oil and gas and be able to communicate. I mean, humbly saying, like the best compliment I've ever been given is walking out of a sales presentation with 15 engineers at a table, and they asked me, where'd you get your engineering degree?
Yeah.
And I went, okay, I am now proficient at what I do. I can now effectively communicate to a group of engineers, and they want to know where I got my engineering degree. I am doing something right. I have started to master some things. So, but that being said, an engineering degree, a finance degree, Those are all going to be very beneficial degrees. I actually have a master's in energy management, and so that has been beneficial in my career. And really the benefit of that was not to dissuade anybody from getting a master's. I think they're very beneficial. The benefit was being able to process information very quickly, because you have to consume such large quantities of information in a fast track system, and you have to be able to memorize those things and process those things and effectively communicate those things on tests and papers. And so really that has been very beneficial in my time, is being able to walk into situations and being able to read the situation, understand what's going on, consume large quantities of information, retain that, and then be able to process that to be able to try to close a sale out or make a sale. So a lot of those life skills have come from previous jobs like roofing or commercial sales or technical backgrounds that I was in the company I'm in now. I started in a very technical product applications division is where I started. So that was really learning the product from the ground up. So I sat at a computer every day and answered phone calls and emails. The product's not working. Why? What's going on? How do we fix it? And you have to start processing through, how do I make this work? So that foundation has really benefited me as I've been travel overseas and sometimes get shuffled into a meeting that says, your product stinks, doesn't work, what's going on? And then you have to quickly realize, well, it's actually not the product, it's the process you've put it in. And if you change this variable, this would make it work. So I think to say all that, that's kind of a ramble, but in industries like I'm in, we're not looking for really one specific type of person. Multilingual is a big benefit. I wish I spoke 12 different languages. I do not. I barely speak coherent English at times.
Well, in the X-Culture cohort, the average number of languages people speak this semester is 3.3.
I'm jealous. I'm so jealous.
Yeah.
I sat in meetings in Turkey for 3 hours and smiled and didn't understand a word.
Well, sometimes that helps too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we try to keep these meetings to 45 minutes. We do have quite a few additional questions, but I see most of them are about the product, about trade regulations, certification, and I think we covered much of that already. So what we will do, as always, if any of the questions have not been answered or if new questions come along, we ask the students to email them to us, admin@xculture.org. And students, what we do with those questions, we put them in a sort of like a database. And if it's a new question, we send it to the company. If it's a question that has been answered in the webinar or by email before, we just copy and paste the answer and send it to you. This way, we sort of buffer the top managers from the overflow of emails, because with thousands of you, obviously, I don't have time to go through the question. And then, so we now have the introduction webinar. Maybe towards the end of the semester, we will do another one, if time permits, where maybe students will share what they have at that time, the ideas, the research they did, and maybe get some feedback so that they can use it before they finalize the proposals.
That'd be great.
So yeah, for the next several months, it will be mainly occasional questions by email. And then sometime in December, we will have a stack of reports, and hopefully there will be lots of interesting, good ideas in them, and maybe even some business leads. All right, thank you so much, Lou. Thank you so much for joining us here, and all the students who were brave enough to join us live. Thank you so much. And those who didn't have a chance to watch live will be able to watch the recording.
Thank you, everyone.